President's Platform, a fireside with Professor Peter Vale. I read an amazing document that I'm going to put pressure on him to share widely once it gets public. So only today, Prof. Vale, I was able to read your document titled Things Left Undone. And wow, I hope we're going to touch on as many of those aspects as possible today. Prof. Vale needs no introduction to us who are in the political sciences. I see former students of his on the call. A few others did say they were going to join, and I think they will be joining as we continue with the program. But Professor of International Relations, and very interesting that, Prof, as I was reading your reflections, there was a chronicle or a telling of the story of the growth of IR as a discipline in South Africa. And you being among the first cohort of students at Wits, we're looking to hear all about it. I first heard of the name Peter Vale as a university student in 2002 at Rhodes University. And we are looking forward to a wonderful time reflecting on your journey, Prof. Welcome to the President's Platform. And by the way, a former president of the South African Association of Political Studies in 1987, Prof.
Yeah.
Welcome to the platform.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you knocking on the door of an old man. I don't appreciate you coming at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when an old man normally has a sleep, as you'll discover. That it's very important. And if I fall asleep, phone my wife and she can come in here and gently wake me up. But thank you for this. It's a wonderful opportunity to engage with a new generation, and hopefully some of the older folks are there that they'll come in and tell me how stupid and wrong I was. If you're a dissident, you're always in trouble. But thank you, and looking forward to a conversation. Let's be open and honest with each other, and let's look for the good in the discipline and for some of the things we've done. So go ahead. I just want to, before we go ahead, remember an incredibly important person who died about 10 days ago.
Oh.
Andre du Toit. Andre du Toit was the professor of political philosophy, first at Stellenbosch and then at UCT. He was an extraordinary person in the field. If you're looking for a giant in the field, this was a giant. Du Toit had the unbelievable knack of bringing moral understandings or moral precepts to the study of politics, which is I think we need all to think about. But also opening up opportunities. He and Johan Degenaar, who was at Stellenbosch, opened up space for people to use analysis as an important way of talking about moral issues. So I think that we have lost a giant, and I think that we should all remember him with gratitude and the fantastic way that he brought an understanding of our country and the world. So thank you for letting me do that.
Wow, thank you, Prof. And condolences to you, close friends, as well as the discipline at large and the university community, both within UCT and other institutions that Prof impacted. Thank you for letting us know, by the way. And it was good for me as I was reading through your sort of memoir or mini memoir, Things Left Undone, to see how you are citing, these stalwarts that have gone to be on the other side, as also including Prof. Max Skuman, that I had a chance to, whose funeral I had a chance to attend and pass a message on behalf of our association. Prof, let's start from the beginning. Who is Peter Vale and why political studies as a discipline and international relations?
Well, you don't even start in little shoes, you start in nappies. I come from Limpopo, where I was born in Davil's Kloof, now called Majaji's Kloof. So my queen has always been Queen Majaji, and not the one that the British think is the queen. Uh, uh, it was a mango farm. I keep on telling you that my favorite fruit is mangoes. And I was schooled in Polokwane, now Capricorn, where my divorced mother was a matron in a school. So I spent the best part of 12 years at the same school. The other kids would go away for holidays, and I would stay in the school and look after the dormitory while the other kids were on holiday. Uh,
Mm,
I went to Wits. I first went to the military, which was an experience to be forgotten. But it was an interesting experience. I mean, I went there quite willingly. My politics were quite orthodox, right wing, English speaking, pro British politics. And then I went to the military. And I went from there to Wits, where I spent a lot of time involved with sex and drugs and rock and roll. So I had an absolutely appalling undergraduate record.
mm,
Uh,
mm.
and But I had in my
Prof, just a second. Could you tilt your screen down a little?
down.
Just, yeah, just a little. Just a little. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, I
There we go.
can't see my own picture here. I don't know why, but it's a face I've seen for a long time, so I don't have to see it again.
Mm, mm,
Uh, so it was only when I was in my third year that I began to think seriously about what to do. But by that stage, the damage had been done to my academic record. And I loved Wits. I loved being in Johannesburg, and I have great friends that I still cherish from those days. I think as I've gotten older, I think I would have been a much better student at Rhodes if I'd gone to Rhodes, because Rhodes was much smaller. Wits
mm,
was a kind of trench warfare. You know, you sat in the bums on the seats at in the classroom, and there were just thousands of you. At Rhodes, as you know, we looked after students. We spoke
mm,
to them.
mm,
Many students, when I was head of department, would call them in and say, "Listen, you did so well in your second year. What's happening in your third year?"
mm.
And the guy would say to me, I remember this is a case in point. The guy would say to me, "No, I'm having a nice time. I'm living with all these other guys in a house together." So that immediately rings a bell, you know.
Sure.
How are the other
Prof,
guys?
do you mind telling us around about when is are you at university? Like in which years?
Went to the military in '66. I went to Wits at '67.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
so just to complete the story at Rhodes, I used to. This one student said to me, "Is having a wonderful time living in this house," and said, "And how are your friends doing?" And he said to me, "Oh, my friends are all passing." I said, "What kind of friends are these? They're leaving you behind, and they're passing." So that should have happened to me at Wits. It never did. And that's why I think that was much better if I'd gone to Rhodes. If
Mm,
I'd gone to Rhodes too, I would have studied with Terence Beard, Nancy Chartman, and a group of people who are very strongly committed to ethical politics. Not that the Wits guys weren't ethical, but the classes were much smaller and the intensity of the work much better. I had some terrific teachers at Wits. I've often made this point that the best course I did at Wits was economic history because
mm,
they began to whisper the name of Marx, and that was really interesting. And then I did Afrikaans as a major, which was a fantastic because they were really looking for on issues of identity and literature and identity and stuff like that. And they were a very dissident group. So I guess this long story is to say I was always on the side of the dissidents. Do you want me to go on with the sad story?
two, two things from it before we can transition to the next thing. So you mentioned military and you mentioned British. To me, if I hear military at that time, I'm hearing African apartheid state security measures, so conscription. Can you clarify that for me?
Yeah, I went to the South African infantry first in Oudtshoorn, which you were just stood around with a thousand other people and wondered what the hell you were doing. There was the beginning of a build-up here. A whole lot of things had taken place. Verwoerd had declared the republic. The republic was up and running, and there was an increasing concern about Africa becoming independent. This had followed me through the whole of my school years, and I was really interested. I think more than in any other subject when I was at school in the decolonization of Africa. So
Mm,
there were a lot of, I mean, there was an entire Afrikaans culture in the military, um, but it was interesting to learn more about it. I myself had grown up, uh, as I said, in Zanin as a little child and learned Afrikaans in a bus on the way to school every day. So that was a way of learning about it, and then learned the other, I guess, the other side of the Afrikaner issue, nationalism, when I was in the military. Um,
mm.
uh, yeah, it was a kind of service you did, so that was important. My father left home when I was, I think, about 5 or 6 months old.
Mm.
Uh, uh, he had been in the Royal Navy and was one of these people who never adjusted to what happened after the war. I'm sorry, this guy's going to make a noise. Um, to what had happened after the war. So he ran off to try and find his fortune in Johannesburg, where my mother stayed on the farm first and then in the hostel. And my mother was very British. I love to tell two stories about her, which I'll bore you with. The one story is she kept on calling England home,
Mm.
and all the books in the house, etc., were in England, about England, etc., as the stories were at that time. And I've got very interested in the politics of that kind of issue. And then uh, and she kept on calling England home. So she went there when she was 50 years old, and she said she was going home. And I said,
Wow.
"My God, what are you talking about? How can you be going home when this is a place you've never been to?" And then the other story
Mm.
I love telling her about it is that her people, who are called Mackay, came from not England or Scotland, but came from Buenos Aires in the Argentine, where they were British citizens who could travel the world and called themselves Scottish or British. So it was a very British environment. The school I went to was a derivative. It was a fantastic school. It was a derivative of the English boarding school system. The games we played were what the English called their gift to the world. The game of
Mm.
rugby, I'm afraid, has not really paid off in their understanding to be the world champions. So people who know me as a fanatical rugby watcher. Um, yeah, so I was brought up in this British environment.
Wow, no, thank you, Prof. A quick one: the transition to the field of politics and international relations. How does that happen?
Well, I go to Wits and I graduate, and then I spend a lot of time doing mainly nothing, but continuing my interest in sex and drugs and rock and roll and rugby.
Hmm.
And then I began to think more and more about what I should do, and I was very impacted. I now realize by Alan Paton's Cry the Beloved Country that comes out the year after I was born and was being read inside South Africa at the time, and it had a big impact on me, I now realize. And as I'm getting older, I'm going to do a little bit of, well, not a little bit of work on Cry the Beloved Country, but I'm working with Duncan Brown of UWC on a book on Cry the Beloved Country,
Mm.
politics, literature, culture, that kind of thing.
Sure, sure. No, you're still on the platform, Prof. And by the way, colleagues, what will happen is that I'm going to continue asking questions for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll open the floor. And then after that, we see where we are going. Prof,
And I
yeah.
get to ask questions in the next 10 minutes after that.
Let's
Now
see
we'll
how.
start with Craig Bailey, ask him why he slows me an essay.
Yeah. So you were telling the story. This is 19. So you went to the military in 1966,
Yeah.
and then back to vets. You're saying something about the schools that the school that you went to, and in the in the paper that you shared with me, you talk about how this is a wonderful tradition of schools, Jeppe, Cares, and King David, King Edward's were amazing schools, but it sort of gave Wits this character of a British, I forgot what your words are that you use there, but a sort of a British feel compared to other places where there would have been a lot more diversity and diverse cultures. Any thoughts about any? Do you want to expand on
Yeah,
that?
I mean, the point I made, or the point I made in the paper, and by the way, it got published today. It's out today. Um, uh, I thought that Johannesburg had been created in towards the end of the 19th century. What is it? 19. I think it's 1981, 1881, 82, somewhere around about there. Um, but it was really created and consolidated around British interests in gold and diamonds. No, diamonds first in Kimberley and then in gold. And the creation of the schools of Johannesburg, the great schools of Johannesburg, and they are great schools. King Edward's that I got to know a little bit as my mother was working there when she died. King Edward's, Jeppe, Pretoria Boys High School, the so-called Milner schools, And then I think a little bit St. John's too. We're drawn into this British understanding, cultural understanding of Britain's place in the world. And they replicated these kind of things. I mean, if you want to go to see an event which is a quintessential English speaking event in this country, which is a commemoration of the people who died in the First World War and the Second World War. See if you can go to the KES, uh, King Edward School commemoration, memorial commemoration on the 11th of November every year, where they have Puppy Day, what they call it in England, in Puppy Day, or even in Grahamstown, or even here in Port Elizabeth, go to Grey College.
Mm.
And these are, this is a kind of British uh, imperial celebration, commemoration of the dead. And I'm moved by that kind of thing because I think we should remember people who sacrificed their lives. We can come to the discussion of the war in a bit, but people who sacrificed their lives, they sacrificed their lives not so much in for their families. They sacrificed their lives for empire and what Britain stood for. Now, these are extremely emotional things, but I think we have to respect them. I
Mm.
wrote a piece maybe 15 years ago about a memorial that I went to in Auckland Park in Johannesburg. So, the British hold on the imagination and the hold of the imagination of Johannesburg, of the Milner schools, the great schools of Johannesburg, was enormous. And I think Wits sort of held on to that tradition. I mean, the greatest accomplishment you could do at Wits when I was a student, and it was to become a lawyer in Johannesburg or a doctor in Johannesburg. Or
Mm.
the best of all was to win the Rhodes Scholarship.
Mm.
These were things that were fundamentally associated with Britain and the British presence inside. I mean, there were tremendous growth in Afrikaner interests in Johannesburg, which started from the 1920s, 30s, and all the work done by Charles van Onselen and other people about Johannesburg is around the power of these competing cultures in Johannesburg. And I don't think that we think sufficiently about this and about how narrow the British cultural and the British imagination was for Britain's place in the world. And by the
Mm.
way, I think we're playing for some of that now as we're seeing in the Gulf and the role that Britain's playing in the Gulf.
Yeah, yeah. Prof, last one for me for this round is just actually, it's interesting that you should talk about how you appreciate the honoring or paying homage to the fallen, because this becomes something very distinct in your style. I mean, you do this, and okay, I would like you to group together your response. Two, one, your friend Hugh Donaldson uh, tells you about the start of this IR program at WITS, which he says, go, if you could tell us when that is. But you talk about your own voice in IR scholarship, and then you begin to honor uh, colleagues of yours who wrote, in this emerging discipline and started, you mentioned people like Prof. Maseko, by the way, and yours is the only write-up that is in honor of him, obituary that you wrote on behalf of Prof. Maseko. And then you write also about exiled scholars in South Africa, Mangezi, Ruth First, Dan Omera. Rob Davis. Well, it was quite interesting for me to see also to meet Rob Davis, not as a politician, but in fact, I guess as a politician, but you citing him as a scholar. Can you tell us in this last part about the growth of IR, about the genesis of IR in South Africa, adverts in particular, and the roles of particularly the colleagues whom you cite that are no longer with us? And by the way, your voice also, because I think it's important because you begin to say how your writing on IR at the time begins to focus on Africa.
Well, I thought we were going to have dessert then, and now I see we're back amongst the soups.
Yeah.
Let me first start about. So I was working as a journalist in Johannesburg, not very successfully and not very happily. And Hugh Donaldson, who a few years ago I phoned him, I hadn't spoken to him since I left school, and thanked him for this, for telling me what I should do with my life. He was quite amazed, but he's a very gentle and nice person. And if he's watching, thanks, Hugh. Uh, um, he told me if it started the IR department, they'd started it in 67, I think. And it was really attached to the Institute of International Affairs, which, as you know, operates out of Jan Smuts' house, which is a memorial to Jan Smuts. And I think it comes to South Africa in one form because there's another form it comes to South Africa too. It comes to South Africa as an institution to propagate the international. Now, I think what people don't understand, the international was not always there. The international was invented. So as we've gone along, we've become more and more international in our lives. As transport and technology and these things have happened, more and more things international have been added to it. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is writing something called, hang on, this is getting caught down here. One of the things that we've got to understand is how the international came to South Africa. And it came in different forms. It came, you know, through, and this will take me towards Rob Davies and that group, Dan Amara. It came very much through the international left. It came through Jewish understandings of their own place in the world. But the international relations, christening a discipline, etc., came from the invention of international relations as a discipline, which started in Aberystwyth in Wales, where the first department was of IR. And it was invented, if you read one account of that, the invention of that was essentially to study international relations to make the world a more peaceful world. So science will help people understand that. And there's a whole literature around there. British IR, particularly, is founded in the Aberystwyth model. I want to just leave American IR because it's slightly different. Um, so in South Africa, there is a contest here of whether the internationalists should promote the memory of Smuts more than the international. So that's why
Mm.
Smuts is assumed to be linked up with South Africa's place in international relations. And this literature, I mean, there's the books on Smuts never stop.
Yeah,
They will
yeah,
never
yeah.
stop. They will never
And and
stop.
and and I think rightly so, Prof. If you look at the contribution that he makes in the real world, in the field, in the real world. I mean, this coming from his personal history, very interesting, but somebody who goes on to sit in the British War Council, among other things, you know. And by the way, I was talking with Prof. Nomalanga Mkhize a short while ago, discussing how the schism in South Africa between Herzog and company versus smarts and company around this idea of the smarts and this global framed as a globalist versus Herzog and others who were more nationalist and focused on. So anyway, I interjected there, but the point I was making was he's rightly a factor in those discussions.
Well, let's open up a discussion, not now, but on a different occasion, about
Sure,
how much of smuts is enough of smuts.
sure, sure.
So every year, 3 books on smuts come out. It's too much. It's too much. Let's look for some other heroes. Let's look for other figures that are important. So I go and work at the Institute of International Affairs, and I've written about this in various places too, which comes in a packaged form, and the packaged form is British IR. It's regarded as sort of whimsical, philosophical, historical, diplomatic history, all of these kind of things. And then so I want to cross to something else because I said there are two traditions.
Mm.
Then some years ago, when I was in Johannesburg at the Institute of Advanced Study, I began to talk with Vineet Thakur, George Barrett, and a few other people. And we began to talk about how international relations becomes a subset of ideas and practices brought to the country by Milner's kindergarten. And we do this book, which Thakur and I did, and Davies Thakur and I did the Millennium paper, in which we argue that a prototype of international relations developed in South Africa with the coming of the Union of South Africa. So we associate ourselves with um, this changing debate about whether IR was a British invention or whether there were many roots and many origins of IR. So that kind of let me go to the group of excluded people. When I first worked at the International Affairs Institute, and I had a great relationship with John Barrett, and I was taken in, who was a very nice man, and I was taken in with the practices of the Institute of International Affairs. But there was something that always worried me, and where was the where was the international relations? Now, listen to this very carefully. Where was the international relations or the international story of South Africa's Black people?
Mm.
And as I began to think about that, I slip into this conversation about some forgotten heroes. And I began to read the most important of these, of course, emerge through the ANC and through different associations of that kind. Most of them are not caught in international relations discipline,
Mm.
except for this enormous contribution made by Sam Noluchungu.
Sam
And
Noluchung.
yeah, and Sam Noluchungu begins uh, 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 trained at Fort Hare, goes to Kiel, goes to the United States, and becomes a real student not only of political change in South Africa, but but also of international relations. He's eventually asked to become the Vice Chancellor of WITS. Unfortunately, he gets cancer and dies. But there was a real hero,
Mm.
if we think about it. As were other people, but Noluchungu emerges. And since you raised two other names, Gezi is an interesting case, but I learned most of what is in that footnote I did on him through Colin Dodge. And he's a person who needs to be recognized in the country because he was a sociologist and a kind of uh, anthropologist of a very special kind. So let me just make two comments. One is about Rob Davies, who is a friend, and I worked with him very closely. Rob Davies is a South African, is taken up in the ANC after a series of very unfortunate incidences at UCT. He moves with Ruth First and Dan Amara to Mozambique. So the 1974 Portuguese coup opens up the possibility of academic work also taking in the region and looking at it very, very separately. And this work I did at the Institute Center for Southern African Studies is mainly concerned with looking at that. Now, I want to just stop uh, uh, with Dan O'Mara, and then we can move on. Dan O'Mara, in my opinion, is one of the most important thinkers on South Africa's place in the world.
Mm.
He's a King Edward's boy, goes to Wits, studies politics. He's in a politics honors group, which was just before me. And the two, I will say, let me use your word that you love so much, giants of thinking in that group are Charles von Onselen is in the honors group, and Dan O'Mara. And O'Mara goes to Sussex and does a degree and writes a thesis on Afrikaner nationalism, which turns the whole argument on Afrikaner nationalism on its head. Says it was really about capitalism and money, uh, and does this fantastic book. Anyway, that's enough.
Wow, thank you, thank you. Colleagues, I don't want to hog the platform. The floor is open. Prof has told us a very interesting stories from love, sex, and rock and roll, drug, sex, and rock and roll. One of those things to chronicling the scholarship in IR. Yeah, I hear that's our vice president. Are you coming in, UB?
Mm. Sorry,
Please.
Mr. President. No, I wasn't coming in. It was a mistake.
Oh,
Sorry.
I heard you
Was a
giggling
mistake.
at the Milner's kindergarten reference there.
You could come in at a mistake only if you're 80 years old and your fingers shaking.
Yubi, floor is open, colleagues. You can type in the chat any question that you have for Prof. Craig, old Rhodian, not so old. Yeah, please come in, Craig.
Yeah, let's use the term former rather,
Yeah,
Dr. Mtimka.
sure.
You spoke about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Let's please not neglect to mention rugby.
Yes.
Yeah, but always a pleasure to hear Professor Vale speak. Thank you for organizing this, Dr. Mtimka. Maybe just a comment on what I've heard so far before I ask the question I prepared before this afternoon session. Maybe just some key words and terminology. I heard Professor Vale refer to moral precepts, and perhaps that's a nice overarching concept for the other terms and words I'm about to cite. He spoke about his appalling undergraduate experience or record, and to me that speaks to redemption, given his journey since then. He spoke about looking after students in the context of Rhodes University, but I think that also says something about the university more widely as an institution. I heard him talk about friendship, and then also about history and tradition. So I think to some degree he may already have started answering the question I have, and that is as follows. In South Africa's present moment, what does the country need primarily, or first and foremost, to make for a more prosperous, secure, and peaceful future?
Prof?
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to firstly congratulate my friend for the fact that his school, which is Graham College in Grahamstown, beat Bishops
Yeah,
at,
yeah.
at the Easter, and everybody who knows me will probably say this is a class thing, and it is a class thing. Though I'm told by someone my grandfather was at Bishops, but I've never told anyone that. Look, we need two things which are critical. And I think everything follows from this. Firstly, we need jobs. It's absolutely undeniable. We need jobs. And secondly, we need ethical leadership. You need jobs because people have to eat and people have to live. And whether you think capitalism or contemporary capitalism or neoliberalism is a good thing or a bad thing, that's the stakeout at the moment. And I think it's critical that that we understand that some of the figures we hear about unemployed people, the numbers of unemployed people are just shattering. And it seems to me what's going on in East London, and Craig can tell us better than anything else, is a factor of jobs. And I mean, ethical leadership brings us back to political science and study of politics. And it brings us, focuses us much more closely on what we teach students. See, I don't think we need to teach students for 4 years about how to use a computer. But we need to teach them that there are ethical considerations in the operation of that computer in the lives of people. And I think that we've lost in many ways this ethical of living together because we are an ethical, should be fundamentally concerned about our ethics. And there's a lot of things to talk about here. Let me just touch on a few of them. I mean, I would like to see more students, and this is a very tiny corner of it, more students studying political philosophy than studying 3 years of comparative government or something like that, because it's in political philosophy and there's so many things opening up now. We have so many Fanon and other things that have opened up which are fundamental. Our political philosophy, I think, still bends a little towards the British end of this thing. We have to teach skills, but we also have to contemplate and think about what the limitations of skills are. Everything can't be AI. You know, there's a group of people some years ago who were saying everything will be AI. And you can't have a conversation or understand the world in AI unless you understand the ethical dimensions of it. So I think it touches on what we teach students. It touches on how we live our lives. And we can't, and this is what I think we did, we can't simply abandon the mediation of interpersonal relationships, where it was, we used to, under apartheid, it was down to race. In the new South Africa, it's down to money. And you can't do that. We gave up race and we got to money. We didn't make much progress because the race money diagrams sort of fitted together. So I think that's how I feel today about this, Craig.
Ethical leadership
Thank you.
and jobs. Thank you, Craig. Any other questions, colleagues? We have, I think, time for two more before we close.
Wow, it went
In
fast.
fact, actually, I just remembered now we are going until past, not 3, so we don't have to rush. Questions? I've got some that came.
Hi,
Yeah, please proceed, colleague. Yeah.
I have a question. Hello, Professor, my old professor from Rhodes. This is Asanda
Asanda,
Hawale from
how are
many
you?
moons ago. I'm very good, thank you. I'm so glad to see you keeping on, and I just thought I'd come on and say hi and thank you so much for all the work that you did in building some of us to be where we are now in this field of political science.
Good. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your comments. When I see some of you on the television, I always think, yeah, that's my students, and how wonderfully they're doing. By the way, I think the roads department is still doing fantastic work. I think that I was there last year. That it's a leading department in the country, and it's been wonderfully transformed, and they still create a punchy and vibrant ethos. But I guess all the departments do it now. These days, spend a little time at the edge of the Pretoria department, which is very good and going great places. Spent a little time at the Bloemfontein department, and I have an association with the Faculty of Humanities here at Nelson Mandela University. So I think all the departments are much more energetic than they were when I was a young man and teaching in them. You know, there's a wonderful opportunity, and when we often think about it, there's a wonderful opportunity for understanding that we make the discipline up as we go along. Hey? We often forget about that. We think we're bound to the footnotes of everybody else's paper, and we are in a sense. But we also have the opportunity of being creative by creating institutions. And I've been very fortunate in my own career to have done 3 or 4 of them. And we make the discipline up as we go along. We include some things, we exclude some things. Here's a little 2 things. Politics started at Rhodes University in the philosophy department, then went to the economics department, then went to the philosophy department again, I think, and then went out on its own as a politics department. So you make this up as you go along. Fitz politics department, which has always been, I think, very strong, started as a public administration department.
Wow.
So I think there's a history. So, you know, we go along and we use the discipline where we think it can be done. I'd like to just say one other thing, because it comes to this creating jobs. One of the biggest difference between now and 40 or 50 years ago is the proliferation of think tanks. There were hardly any think tanks in the old days. There was the Institute of International Affairs, Race Relations. There was an Africa Institute in Pretoria. I think if you pushed me and you made me sit down and think about a cup of tea, I could think of 1 or 2 more. Today, you can't walk into a room where politics is being discussed and trip over a think tank. And I think think tanks are important, and I've been in a lot of trouble for rubbishing them a bit, but I think they're important institutions, and as we know, they're institutions which absorb the skills of our students.
Yeah, yeah. two things.
Yeah, can I, sorry, I
Oh,
just
yeah,
wanted to add
please proceed,
one
Asanda.
last thing. Say obviously again, thank you for that. And I 100% agree with you. And I was laughing as you were talking about having started off at vets and then gone to roads, because I actually did it the other way around. I started at roads and then I went to vets, and I was actually quite shocked at how sausage factory the institution was, and it was quite a shock. So I think you raise a very important conversation around where the importance and the impact of where you study politics, because I remember, to your point about like being able to have a level of intensity, I remember when I did the honors class with you on security and we're reading, I mean, we just spent time reading that Johnny Steinberg book and nothing else. And I'm always fascinated. Yeah, no, I heard it. That was the core. But like when I look at, for example, how I'm still pulling from those narratives and from those engagements when we're talking about the white genocide myth today, and for me, I'm raising that because I think often when people are building their curriculum and when they're thinking about how to put together a curriculum, they may not necessarily think about how to ensure that you build things that live on and arguments that can be made almost not in perpetuity, because you don't want an argument to stay for that long, but to kind of be able to hold water. And so for me, again, it's always fascinating to me to go back to that archive. It's been like 20 years and I'm still essentially kind of thinking, what can we learn about white genocide? What can we learn about the ways in which people think about security, the ways in which people engage with identity, and all of those issues that were happening back then? And I consider myself lucky to be able to do that, because when I've spoken to a lot of people, they don't necessarily have the same relationship with their the ways in which they studied. And I think, one of the credits of Rhodes, for example, was exactly what you said, this being very clear that we make this up as we go along. Because I remember, for instance, Leonard Prague, who was your colleague, taught us chaos theory, which was a completely made up theory. But it was powerful, because what it did is it meant that when I first became an academic, I knew that I didn't have to only engage the canon, but that I could create something myself, and I could, make it up as I went along, which is something that is essential, I think, to decolonization and rethinking how we engage the study of politics and the engagement of politics, even in terms of like how I live politics as a political analyst that isn't necessarily attached to an institution in a political science department.
Wow. So I'm happy you came in before me, Asanda, there, because I was going to say to Prof, I'm finding his comments liberating, both in the piece which you have not read, as well as what he was saying today, about how academics find a voice in their research and teaching. So he begins with a question that says, but where is, and I'm paraphrasing, where is the international relations of Black people? And that question leads him to explore international relations focusing on Africa, which is a pathfinding journey and career pathing, as it were. So it's exciting in that sense. And then coming back, this point, that you say is, we make up as we go. Obviously, it's an educated making up process, but to me, it's liberating and it's affirming in the sense that we all get triggered by different things in our inquiries or in our search for meaning and purpose. And so it's great to hear a seasoned academic saying there's space for that within what otherwise is a discipline that's got a history. Craig, do you want to come in this theme, or must I give Prof to come in and then we come to you?
I think Asanda referred to white genocide. Perhaps I'll wait for you to allow Prof Vale to respond before I come in and ask a question. Thanks.
Sure.
Ongama.
sure, sure.
You know, this genocide issue, it is...
Sorry, Prof. No, if you're going to talk about that, sorry, let me then finish my train of thought. Apologies.
Okay, well, I wasn't going to talk about white genocide, but go on then, you talk.
Okay. That it got me thinking about present day America. And I remember writing in my master's thesis, as goes America, so goes the rest of the world. My question is, how can South Africa, more specifically the South African government, best shield the country from the decisions of the Trump administration?
So you want a policy answer?
Well, perhaps both a policy answer that helps us understand or have a clearer picture of what needs to be done practically.
Let me start with the genocide thing. This is such a difficult issue, and because the rights to the word genocide have been so strictly controlled that it's difficult to move and to try and discuss this massive killing of people without getting permission from a certain epistemic group to call it genocide. So let me go back to Limpopo. There is at the edge of the Waterberg a farm. Well, I'm not going to mention the name of the farm now, but it's a farm where a murder took place, where some local Ndebele killed some white people in the 1850s, I think it was. The response of the white trackers was to chase these people to a famous cave called Makapan's Cave, and it's halfway between Petersburg and what used to be called Potgietersrust or Polokwane and Mogokong. And a genocide took place at that, a genocide of local Ndebele people. Now, I don't know enough about it, or haven't thought about it, or haven't read enough about it. And someone has said he would fill me in on the politics of Limpopo, which I'm looking forward to. But what do we think of that as a genocide? I mean, if that's a genocide, and the control of the word genocide is so tight, then how can you have a white genocide in this country? I'm not saying farmers are not being killed. I'm not saying that mountain of crosses outside Polokwane is not an expression of deep anxiety and a failure of people to police properly, or a failure of economics to develop and deliver to people. But it's just that the word genocide is such a loaded word. So, I mean, I would welcome people talking more about genocide in the context of South Africa. And I would like to read that work. Let me talk about this. Let me talk about policy.
Maybe, Prof, before you move from there. So I was doing some work in South Sudan, interviewing people there. By the way, had gone to do a study on the power distribution model, and federalism was their choice. So I'm doing interviews, and I find that among the people, they are concerned about the nomadic cattle herders and how they tend to violate the property rights and the rights to life of the farmers. And the nomadic cattle herders come from the dominant group, the Dinkas, whereas the farmers come from the marginalized groups. The feeling among the marginalized groups was that this is state-sponsored violence. When I interviewed the people from the UN, they mentioned that, look, what happened here is that what was left of the state after independence was eroded by the war that immediately followed. When I talk about after independence, I'm talking about from 2011 as opposed to 1957. So what was left of the state was eroded by the war that ensued thereafter. So what these guys perceive to be state-sponsored violence, in that the state doesn't do anything about these people, is in fact an eroded state that has got no capacity at that localized level. There's no professional police. There's people who've been fighting the war. Anyway, I thought sometimes the DNA of a conflict in a particular area does kind of constrain what different groups, what words different groups can use, or what terms they can use, or concepts they can use to describe their reality. And I think that in many ways in South Africa, what makes people want to police the use of white genocide are anxieties about the extent to which the state is actually failing as opposed to enabling. But anyway, debate for another day. You were proceeding from the point.
Let me just touch on this and then come to Craig. I mean, I think that the relationship between state, what is a state? You know, Benedict Anderson's imagined community, the nation idea, and property rights are so fundamentally entrenched in a line of argument which has been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed to now a situation where the only thing that's defended in democracy often are property rights. And property rights always suffer from these questions that we asked about free market people in the 1970s. People have no property rights. Where do they get the funds to acquire property rights? So it's this the glorification, celebration of property rights, which cut across things like migration and suffered, etc., etc. I mean, if you look at the migration of people through Southern Africa, and again, let me talk about Van Onsselen's work, but it's also the work of many other people. That migrants have made Southern Africa. Migrants have made Southern Africa. It's not property barons or mining barons that made Southern Africa. It's migrants that made Southern Africa. So, I mean, there's a whole argument here. Let me come to Craig. I mean, in a curious kind of way, South Africa has accommodated the Trumpian side of this argument all along. South Africa has apologized, fallen on its knees, done all of these things. And what America has done is appointed this guy as the ambassador yesterday. I mean, that's been the discussion. Everybody's been so nice to him and blah, blah, blah. I think our policy on America is, from a moral point of view, and just leave the practical side. And I can hear these people already shouting at me, my family, my brothers, my kids, shouting at me, saying, yeah, but, we have to trade with them, etc., etc., etc. So you have to make up your mind what is important here. And that leads from policy into the whole question of what are the rights, what are the moral concerns. There's a curious thing here that I was trying to throw the other day. If you look at American policy towards South Africa during apartheid, where there was a tremendous disinvestment, etc., etc., this is the reverse mirror of what's going on now. The American establishment often pushing against the door, saying you can't invest in South Africa. Business community saying, well, that's where money is made. They've got this, they've got the minerals, by the way, which we didn't have, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I don't think one policy shift is going to do it. What I do think is that the policy parameters of what we've adopted with this administration have come out correctly. And in fact, in the eyes of many people across the world, we look quite sweet on that. Just as a little footnote, I mean, I think if you gave me the possibility of living in America or living in the Eastern Cape, I think I've made up my mind.
Wow. Wow. Two questions that were received. I think one of the people who sent us these questions in advance is on the call, and the other South African Communist Party member is not. So let me read anyway. So, Sianda, if you
Is this
want.
from the Communist Party?
Yeah, I'll read. Let me start with the academic first. Sianda Kate at Walter Sisulu University, and Sianda, you feel free to come in if I didn't understand your question. How are dictatorial oligarchic regimes affecting foreign investment policies in developing countries, particularly regarding infrastructure and economic growth? Second question, should people be required to have relevant qualifications before joining a political party? Would this improve governance from the local level up to South Africa's participation on the global stage? Then the second one is
That's the second one. That's the second one. You must have a third one.
So the third one is from a different person.
Okay,
So
let's do the first two first.
Sure.
So on this, the second, the answer to the second question is no, no, no. You can imagine going to a political meeting and someone getting up and saying, but you made a mistake in the footnote here. That's the kind of things that academics fight about. So I can't see that it would help us very much. I would much rather see some sort of critical skills being taught to people at universities so that they ask the right kind of questions and follow up with the right kind of answers. I mean, of course, if you're an economist, you think that everybody should know economics and that everybody should be able to talk and see where the logic of economics goes. But let's not argue about economics here because I'll be in such trouble with a whole lot of people. I mean, I basically think that economics is essentially not an education. Economics is mastering a kind of certain language, and you live within the context of the language, and you make your decisions within the context of the language. So let me go to the first question. Look, authoritarian oligarchical states are always trying to satisfy the hunger of their supporters, trying to make money, etc., etc., etc. So they are inventing things which I think are not as important as they make them out to be. Markets, how many children are there? How much minerals do they have? What do we need minerals for, etc., etc., etc. So, and then there's the unspoken part of this and the unspoken part of us never talking enough about this since Laurie Nathan left the country, and that is the armaments industry. We don't talk about it enough. I mean, you can bet your bottom dollar that there are people in this country that are selling arms to both sides of the war in Russia and Ukraine. That's the market.
Yeah.
But is it the market? Is there a deeper question we need to ask about that kind of thing? So let me leave that. Come to the third question.
Sure. Craig, thank you so much for your add-on there. And he's saying, if I may comment on the question about qualifications, knowledge and skills are important, but become harmful without ethics. The third question came from Kenneth Nzuzu, is a South African Communist Party. With the growing fragmentation of political ideas and voices in South Africa caused by the multi-party system, are we on the right path to achieving meaningful social and economic impact?
Well, I would say yes. I would say that I don't think we'll get there on our own right, but we will get there by talking about coalitions and how coalitions work. I see the other day, and I'm fascinated by this, that the Dutch were working with some South African NGO. Was it the Institute of International Affairs? I've forgotten, on coalition governments across the world. So I would say the more ideas on the table, the more interesting and the more possibility for getting out of problems. And let's go back to economics. You know, the free market system, which has been triumphed in this country 50 years, when Leon Lowe walked into a room and said, free market system will set you free, was an absolute takeover of a political debate in this country. Apartheid took it over, the Progressive Party took it over, everybody took it over. It became the grist of the conversation. So I think I'm saying that the bigger the conversation, the more opportunities to have a conversation about things. I mean, the other thing that's overtaken our politics are numbers. You know, there are people that are doing work about numbers which are crucial. I think that Mr. van Onselen, who's working in numbers, is clearly giving us and telling us bits about politics which are really important. But I think that there are 1,000 things which tell us about politics. I mean, the most fun I had, and this brings us full circle, maybe the most fun I had ever was doing a book about cartoons and international relations. Why did I do that? People came on, why do you do that? It's a different way of looking at international relations. If we're concerned about the way that we think international relations is, let's look at what cartoonists say about it. I mean, I'll give you another example. I think that there is a set pattern of delivering messages of international relations. And if you go to a journal like the South African Journal of International Affairs, or these journals, or, you know, the journals look more and more the same. There's no diversity. There's no interesting kind of difference, you know, 3 referees, only this can set you free, etc., etc. Well, I think that's one way of doing it, but interviews are one way of doing it, which is a different way of looking at how knowledge is created. Why don't we look at the international relations of movies in South Africa? How South Africa has made movies. Let's see how many of these movies look at international questions. I mean, there's this famous movie done of was it ants or something else who took over Soweto? Do you remember this movie? You must have been a child. Ongama about how the guys from outer space overtook Soweto
Oh yeah, District
in
6.
yeah. So I mean, this is an interesting way of looking at identity and how identity is formed within the context of what we're doing. So, let's look at identity instead of international relations. Let's look at people's humor. Let's look at other ways of thinking about it. And let's see if we can think about economics that way. The problem is that economics, you can only think of it through the market and supply and demand.
Hmm. Hmm.
Anyway,
Wow.
I'm sorry to be so dissident.
Wow. Wow. No, thank you. Thank you. I call on the EXCO colleagues to share about SAAPS and the research committees that we have. I'd like to ask you, Prof, the three things in your career you're proudest about.
Wow.
And lastly, how academics can find their voice or express it.
Just before you come into these 4 points, let me just make one point that you just made.
Mm.
When I thought about, if you're asking me the question, what can SAAPS do? Instead of the journal or with the journal, why don't you have a regular news bulletin which put out ideas, new ideas in South African politics? I mean, I give you this Cape Independence Party. There's a bunch of white people running around with Union Jacks on their socks. All of them wear Union Jack socks. And they think that this can be, South Africa can, or Cape Town can become a separate political entity. This is an idea which is running around. I haven't seen any thing published on it, and no academic thing, but there are hundreds of ideas running around in politics. And could you do a monthly report on, here's 5 new ideas in South African politics? What should we think about them, or how do you think about it? Anyway, I guess it's just further reach. 5 things I'm most proud of. No, 3 things. Well, look, I was very happy to recover from my bad start. I was enormously proud of the fact that I got to do a PhD. It's become a kind of disease in my family, PhDs. So I was enormously proud to have been appointed to the Mandela Chair. And I was enormously honored when the Vice Chancellor of the Free State phoned me to ask me if I would accept an honorary doctorate from the University of the Free State. So, I mean, it's a funny little story, and I'll tell the story. And so he phoned me up one day, and he said to me, this is Professor Peterson. Yes, I knew him a little bit. And I said, yes, how's it going in the Free State? I'm very gratified that, what you're doing is very good, etc., etc., etc. Then he said, I'm phoning you to ask you if you would accept an honorary doctorate. And I mean, I have a genuine nervousness about this. And I said to him, look, I think that there are much more deserving people than me. And then he said, that may be true, but their names are not on this list. So there are three things. How do you find your voice? Write, publish, talk, argue. And the best thing you can do of all is read, read, read. And don't only read political philosophy or administration. Read intellectual history. I mean, the most wonderful stuff I've got from disciplinary history, social theory. We haven't talked about social theory at all. And I mean, I went to the Netherlands once and spent a year reading social theory. I never looked back. I never looked back. I never went back to international relations theory. I just said, this makes no sense to me. So read novels. Read as much as you can. So that's what I think.
Wow. Wow. Let me check. Wow. Thank you, Prof. That's amazing. I really appreciate your thoughts there. Let me check if any of the EXCO people have budged. UB, do you want to talk about research committees, SAAPS membership, please?
Good afternoon. Thanks, Ongama. Perhaps I wouldn't like to speak on it, except to say that we would like to welcome people who would like to join SAAPS to please go to our website, fill in the form, and join us. Thank you very much, Professor Vale, for your insights. And yeah, we have a few research committees, one of which is international relations, South African politics, African politics, gender politics. So we are starting our research committees up again. So if there are people on this call who are interested, please do let us know. And you have been inspired, so I hope that you will try and live out the things that Professor Vale has shared with us through our research committees and through SAAPS. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Greatly appreciated. Prof, this has been amazing. And by the way, that call is not only to those of you who joined the live call, but also should you stumble upon this recording on our YouTube platform, which you will shortly, please reach out to us on our website, saaps.org.za. There is a form for you to join or find out more about the association. So click that form. It takes you straight to the email of our Deputy Secretary, Melissa Mlambo, and your journey gets started. Prof, thank you so much. I don't want to repeat what you said. It's really been amazing. And strange enough, the idea that you just shared, when I read your piece, I said there's got to be a lot more that we do, and thank you for directing, for shaping the thought about what that more can be outside of the journal. The journal is our premium research output, organizing scholarship in South Africa on politics and in international relations and related disciplines. But I think that this is a great challenge to look into a more popular read, which can kind of summarize emerging ideas and share them with the membership. Parting shot from your side?
Parting shot. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful exchange. I've enjoyed it. I'm sorry I've spoken so much in the first term singular. So I apologize for that, but it's been great to speak to you again. If there's anything you need, give me a call. It's time for tea.
Thank you. Enjoy. Thank you, Prof. Cheers, colleagues. Thank you for joining the call and participating.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.